An elderly man shot dead during a brazen pension pay point robbery in Soweto. A former prisoner accuses correctional services of stealing his intellectual property. Hello and welcome to it. You're watching eNEWS Direct. I'm Duduzile Ramela.
And I'm Sandy Legangose. Good evening.
To comment on any of our stories, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. That's at eNEWS Direct.
And you can also track our main stories using the following hashtags: Piecha and Kenya Girl.
We start with this. A pensioner has been shot dead during an armed robbery in Diepkloof, Soweto. He was collecting his old age pension from a pay point in the area. An armed gang stormed the pay point and robbed several ATMs. They made off with around 700,000 rand.
These pensioners are traumatized after a brazen early morning attack at a Diepkloof payout point. An old man was shot dead while trying to hide under a chair.
10 suspects arrived here at the Net1 Financial Services. They got inside the place and they bombed 3 ATMs. This is where pensioners get their monthly pension money. One pensioner was shot dead, one security guard was shot. He's stable, he's taken to the hospital.
One man opened the doors and another jumped in. One of the attackers wore a mask. The others followed to the pay points. They started firing gunshots and that's when we started running. I'm still looking for the granny I came here with. I cannot find her.
Linda Mbata is the manager of the pension payout point. He describes the attack as the most frightening 5 minutes of his life.
When they entered, they came to our security first, and they were threatening us that we must fall down. They want to take the money in our ATM.
Police have opened cases of murder, attempted murder and robbery. Pensioners have been advised to collect their grants from other Net1 Services branches around Gauteng.
The upcoming local government elections will go ahead. That's the word from the Cooperative Governance Ministry. Now, this comes as the IEC is waiting for the Constitutional Court to clarify an electoral court ruling that voters must have their addresses visible on the voters' roll. Now, if this stands, millions of South Africans, especially in rural areas, will be ineligible to vote.
It's a race against time. Before August 3rd, the IEC needs to solve the problem of millions of South Africans not being eligible to vote. Last year, the Electoral Court ruled that Tlokwe by-elections were not free and fair and subsequently found that the voters' addresses should be visible on the voters' roll. The Cooperative Governance Department says more than 12 million South Africans out of 26 million registered voters are affected. The Constitutional Court will hear the case from next week, but government says even if that court endorses the Electoral Court's ruling, elections will go ahead.
If we are to postpone elections, that obviously that will require a constitutional amendment. So that's not an option. But hence we still have hope in our justice system. And as we go to the court on the 9th of May, we think that sanity will prevail. And this matter will be clarified so as those voters are not disenfranchised.
Government says it has a contingency plan.
Provide South Africans not with an address, not a formal address in the conventional sense of the word, but some identifier that links their place of residence to a geographic coordinate system.
The Cooperative Governance Ministry says the IEC needs 75 days to prepare for an election, and it hopes to have the voters' roll finalized before the election day is promulgated. Lester Kivet, Parliament.
The first day of the inquiry into suspended National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha's fitness to hold office has got off to a rocky start. There were arguments over the terms of reference, and Piecha's lawyers say they haven't been given the list of witnesses. Proceedings were adjourned early after the first witness was unable to give evidence without an interpreter.
It's almost 4 years since police officers gunned down 34 protesters in Marikana in the northwest. And investigations into the shooting are still ongoing. This time, the woman leading the SAPS at the time is in the spotlight. The inquiry will also determine whether Ria Piecha deliberately misled the Marikana Commission, the President and South Africans with her public comments and statements to the media. This comment in particular is also being analyzed.
Let us take note of the fact that whatever happened represents the best of responsible policing.
Something Piecha's lawyers are dead against.
The evidence leaders are bound by the terms of reference which established this inquiry, and therefore they are not permitted to call witnesses who did not testify before Falam in order to augment or bolster a case that was never made before Falam.
The evidence leaders eventually got their way, but with certain conditions.
The witnesses, however, have to be relevant. So the touchstone of whether a witness should testify will be determined by the relevance of that testimony.
The first witness is expected to be called when the inquiry resumes. Bongiwa Kumalo, Centurion.
The Department of Correctional Services could find itself in the grip of a scandal. It's related to a 378 million rand tender awarded for the implementation of an inmate information monitoring system. A former inmate claims to have developed the system and accuses the department of stealing his intellectual property.
This is Quinton Richards presenting his proposal to implement an inmate information monitoring system to correctional services heads in Cape Town.
As you see, step one, that is an identity card, and what we have here is what we call the IPv2. This is just a demo model.
This presentation was made 2 years after he'd first started developing the system. Richards says he came up with the idea for a biometric identification system after being convicted on a drug offense in 2012. Handwritten on prison scrap paper, Richard says he worked day and night, even during the allocated 1 hour a day exercise time.
I suspect that they have actually copied my information. They've used it without my permission, my IP, and I'd like to clarify certain things with them, and they have become extremely unresponsive since the tender has become active.
He'd even manufactured prototypes of the plastic cards that would store the inmates' personal information. Richards went on to sign a non-disclosure agreement with the department's Jackie Reed Moses in June 2014. Weeks later, at the end of October, Correctional Services requested his business proposal and documents. National Commissioner Zach Modise says he has no knowledge of such an agreement.
I'm not aware of any record that the department is having from my position as the National Commissioner, but also from the position of our information technology. We don't have any record.
After months of scrutiny, DCS returned his documents saying his proposal was declined, but it later awarded a multi-million rand tender to Integratron, part of the SASTEC group of companies, around April 2015. The tender requirements, a carbon copy of Richards' presentation. SASTEC and the department are currently under scrutiny both by South Africa's new tender regulator and Parliament. It's been reported that the tender regulator has ordered correctional services to cancel this so-called irregular tender. SASTEC has since denied Richards' claims and says the tender is currently under review. DCS says everything is above board. Neither SASTEC nor DCS are willing to provide proof that Integratron developed the system before Richards did. Richards is exploring his legal options. Leanne Jansen, Cape Town.
A quick look at world news now, and rescue workers in Kenya have pulled a 1-year-old girl from the rubble of a collapsed building in Nairobi. The little girl was rescued at about 5 o'clock this morning after spending nearly 4 days under the rubble. She's being treated at the Kenyatta National Hospital for injuries and severe dehydration. The 6-story building collapsed following heavy rain. At least 22 people were killed. Aid workers say the chances of finding more survivors are fading fast. And lawyers charged with untangling the multi-million-dollar estate of music superstar Prince, who died with no known will, are in court for the start of what could be a lengthy dispute over his fortune. 6 of his siblings were listed as heirs in court documents. The exact value of his estate has not yet been disclosed, but his music catalog alone has been estimated at over $500 million. The 57-year-old musician was found dead at his home in suburban Minneapolis on April 21. The cause of death remains undetermined. Let's check in with the sports team.
Football on the way. Meanwhile, Duduzile stepped in to tell us about this social media.
Indeed, I do. Thank you so much, Sandile. And we start with this. This morning, Sanral's outsourced workers blocked the N1 highway in Midrand as they marched to their head office. They blocked the freeway for a good part of the morning peak hour. They're demanding a wage increase, Provident Fund, and a 13th check. Their employer, Teti Traffic, is offering a 7% salary increase. Sanral has distanced itself from the labor dispute. And we end off with this. Today is World Press Freedom Day, and the theme for 2016 is access to information and fundamental freedoms. This is your right. The day celebrates the principles of press freedom and assesses the state of media freedom across the globe. Activities include paying tribute to journalists who lost their lives in the line of duty and defending media independence. Remember, we do love to hear from you. You can, of course, check us out on Twitter and Facebook. That's at eNEWS Direct, or you can head on over to our website. That's enca.com/direct. Do stay with us after the break. Your business news as well as your weather details. Money matters now, and car sales have taken a drop as consumers continue to feel the pinch. New vehicle sales slipped 9.2% in April compared to a year ago. The Department of Trade and Industry says 40,390 vehicles were sold last month. Now, due to the stronger rand, exports have risen almost 32% year on year. They saw over 31,000 units sold compared with the same month last year. Vehicle manufacturers have committed to investing billions into the local market. Brands such as Ford, BMW and Volkswagen announcing a 13 billion rand investment. And the manufacturing sector showed good improvements last month. Activity was boosted by a firmer rand, which made input costs lower. The Purchasing Managers Index hit 54.9 in April. That's up from 50.5 in March. PMI is now 10 points above its January number, continuing its recent uptick. Analysts see a change in fortunes as managers share brighter expectations for PMI. A reading above 50 indicates that the manufacturing sector is expanding. Right, let's see how the markets perform today. Let's check in with the Weather Center now. Here's Candace.
A cold front sweeps along the Eastern Cape coast on Tuesday night, bringing in showers with it. We're expecting things to dry out on Wednesday, but as a high-pressure ridge is in behind it, it still leaves behind some cloud in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal, as well as over the northeastern interior. That ridging high also brings in the possibility of light rain or drizzle along the northeastern escarpment, with evening rainfall expected along the north coast of KwaZulu-Natal, and we're forecasting fine and dry weather over the western and central parts. It'll be a partly cloudy and mild day over the interior part of KwaZulu-Natal on Wednesday, 24 degrees for Durban and Richards Bay, with the possibility of evening rainfall along the north coast of KwaZulu-Natal. Mostly sunny to partly cloudy throughout the Eastern Cape, with most maximum temperatures peaking in the low 20s in the afternoon. We'll see fine and dry weather as we head towards the Western Cape, with lots of sunshine on Wednesday. A particularly warm day for Cape Town, Longabaan and Worcester, all at 27 degrees, but with highs in the low 20s for the Southern Cape coastline. Fine and dry as we head towards the Northern Cape, with a high fire danger warning over the northwestern part. In fact, Bergwin's warm Alexander Bay up to 35 degrees, and you'll see a chilly start to the day over the southern and eastern part of the province. It'll be a sunny and mild afternoon for the Free State, with a cold start of the day for the Free State and the northwest. In the northwest, we're expecting a fine and warm Wednesday afternoon, with highs in the mid-20s. We move into some cloud as we head towards Limpopo, with some drizzle in the forecast for Zanin at 22 degrees. Light rain is expected for Bombela at 22. Still warm for Skukuza at 28, with some drizzle expected for Emakazeni and Ermelo at around 20 degrees. Mostly sunny and dry for Gauteng, with a cold start of the day over the southern part of the province, 9 and 26 for Pretoria. On Thursday, we're expecting another dry day across the country, with a pleasant autumn afternoon along South Africa's coastline, a bit of cloud for Gauteng and parts of Limpopo. And then on Friday, we're expecting rainfall along the coast from George all the way through to Richards Bay, with cloudy and wet weather over parts of the Eastern Cape. That's all from the Weather Centre for now. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you, Candice. After the break, the Gautrain high-speed locomotive goes head-to-head with one of the Air Force's finest. So here's a question for you. Between a military helicopter and the Gautrain, who would you put your money on?
I think I'd go with the aircraft. The South African Air Force helicopter took on Gauteng's high-speed locomotive.
It's part of efforts to promote the annual Air Force Museum Air Show. The Air Force turns 96 this year.
It's a 57-year-old helicopter versus a high-speed train. Last year, the veteran eNEWS won, and the South African Air Force is hoping this year won't be any different.
It is also to promote our aviation heritage, display it as well, and then to promote aviation awareness amongst the youth. Of course, we cannot forget that it is to promote the image of the South African Air Force, because it's still an Air Force that inspires confidence.
The race started at the Gautrain's Hatfield station and ended in Centurion. Both the train and the helicopter were traveling between 130 and 140 kilometers per hour. In the end, the 57-year-old eNEWS was victorious.
No, I had no doubt. Well, I'm confident in the aircraft's abilities.
After the British Royal Air Force, the South African Air Force is the oldest in the world. Lindwe Sithole, Pretoria.
Here's a reminder of the day's top stories before we say goodbye. An elderly man shot dead during a brazen pension pay point robbery in Soweto. A former prisoner accuses correctional services of stealing his intellectual property. And that's a wrap from the eNEWS Direct team.
It is indeed. Up next, Rhythm City. We're back same time tomorrow.
Bye-bye.